Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Upon Further Review. I'm Troy here with Mike, and today we are going to talk about this is almost a series in what we want in police reform, at least from speaking for ourselves here. And one thing that I have held for a while is I don't believe that traffic stops should exist anymore. Traffic stops are the most common interaction between police and civilians, and they're primarily motivated for money. That's why you see officers sitting with the radar gun out instead of patrolling dangerous neighborhoods and things of that nature. And more critically, we're starting to reform the very reasons why officers can stop you. There's an article published in the Washington Post about a week ago, and it's titled, After a Black Driver is Handcuffed and Arrested, VA Prosecutor Says She Should Have Never Been Pulled Over. What happened was the Virginia State Police trooper spotted a car with their tail lights out. They later pulled the driver out of the car, attempted a driving while influenced arrest, but the driver had a zero point zero blood alcohol level. They ended up arresting this driver, taking him downtown. They left the phone and the wallet of this driver inside the car, impounded it, took him downtown, put him in jail, put her in jail, only to let her out just a few hours later with no phone and no wallet, which we all know in today's day and age, that's a nightmare, as she tried to figure out exactly where her car is, how she paid for it, and how she'd even get to it. And all of this for taillights out. And what makes it interesting in this case is just 5 days before, the new law went into effect where Virginia passed a law stating that you cannot pull someone over for missing their taillights being out as a primary offense, because they're trying to reduce many of these needless interactions with law enforcement. You can't turn over a rock without seeing the many cases around the country in which Black lives have been lost or abused and mistreated when it comes to traffic stops. They've always been subjective. If a cop follows you for a few miles, they can pull you over for any number of reasons, even if they're factually wrong. When it comes to traffic stops, there's even been Supreme Court cases, such as Hine versus North Carolina in 2014, in which the law enforcement officer was new to North Carolina, and he pulled over a civilian because their middle tail light is out. They have two showing, and the third one was not. They believed that to be in violation of the law, and that was the cause of the traffic stop. Well, it turns out that does not violate North Carolina law at all. And that was the pretext for a traffic stop, which, by the way, should be an unreasonable search and seizure. That should be a violation of the Fourth Amendment, but we're not going to go diving down, legalese at the moment. In that case, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of police that even when they are factually and materially wrong, a police officer who stops a car based on a reasonable, even though they're mistaken, understanding of the law does not violate the Fourth Amendment. It is a broad and punishing power with extremely wide latitude that we give to police officers. And we need not look too far to see that this is being used and abused against Black people in America. Because no matter what the population of an area is, you will find that they are pulling over Black people more often than anyone else, even though white people are just as likely, if not more, to have drugs, contraband, illegal guns, things of that nature. They're not driving through rich neighborhoods, harassing rich people in rich cars. They're going to the poor side of town, people who cannot fight, who cannot put up lawsuits. And every now and then it results in violence. We spoke in our past podcasts about Philando Castile, who was pulled over 50 times in 13 years. Until finally, and this is for those who, just to catch you up, was the man who has a legally owned firearm with the licenses and all of the above, and goes to hand the license that the officer asked for to him. The officer thought he was drawing his gun, freaked out and fired and killed him. And that case is still being litigated, going through its processes. But I myself, I can't speak for many people, I've been pulled over frivolously easily about over a dozen times. At some point, you just stop keeping the explicit count. I've been pulled over rightfully so twice, and I was given tickets both times. The other times, I've been pulled over frivolously, I said, over a dozen times, just fishing expeditions, just to see if you have your license, your paperwork. I didn't break any laws. I wasn't speeding, any of the above. And they're trying to catch you because I was pulled over more, Mike, when my first car was a Crown Vic. And that's a quote unquote hot car. There are in certain areas, in certain neighborhoods, they're looking for specific types of cars, specific profiles, young black men to pull over. They are absolutely profiling people when they're making these decisions. And that's before we get into the unethical reality that they're pulling people over to raise revenue and generate money. It's not about traffic safety. It's not about lowering accidents, what have you. It's not even about crime. It's about money and control and fishing and meeting quotas for finding people to arrest. And if you can't figure out a reason to arrest someone, just like the young lady in the article that we referenced from Washington Post, 0.0 blood alcohol level, you're still getting arrested. There have literally been cases of people blowing 0.0 and still being taken in cuffs. Police are never wrong. And they're never going to admit they're wrong on the side of the road, and they're going to escalate these issues. I personally believe, Mike, that we should abolish traffic stops outright. How do you feel about that?
I am a little mixed on it. I think we should get rid of certain traffic stops, i.e., I pull you over because you have an air freshener dangling in the window, or i.e., I pulled you over because you were doing slightly below the speed limit, which happened recently to a black man who was driving down the highway. The cop pulled him over because he said he was doing 5 miles under the speed limit. Silly stuff like that, I definitely agree doesn't need to have a traffic stop. I don't want to see you weren't maintaining lane position in your lane. I mean, did I leave the lane or not? Silly stuff like that, I don't think. I think for things of public safety, you have someone doing 80 miles an hour through a school zone, while school's letting out, then yeah, I think that's warranted to being pulled over. I mean, that's just a lack of decency and safety for everybody else. But outside of public safety, I don't really think we need to pull anybody over, especially with the advances of technology. If you see somebody, for instance, they have their tags are expired or something, they got cameras on these cars now that can scan license plates. If it's scanned and it's expired, send them a bill, a ticket in the mail. Do you really need to pull somebody over for that kind of event? It's also, if you even talk to police officers, a traffic stop is the most dangerous time for them, and for them as a police officer, when they're actually engaging in traffic stop. That's where most incidents occur, when a police officer is actually doing a traffic stop. So it's not even safe for them. So it's not safe for the public in most cases. It's not safe for them in most cases. I don't know why we do it as frequently as they need to. I really want to get rid of my problems with traffic stops are fishing expeditions. Come in, pull you over. I've been pulled over with a friend, and he pulled us over because we had air freshener in the window. And all he wanted to do was looking inside the car, searching the car while he was talking to us, trying to find some kind of probable cause to search the vehicle. That type of stuff needs to stop. That type of stuff is ridiculous. It's a waste of time. And I don't need fishing experts. I don't need you out here trying to invent crime in order to, in order to pad your numbers, or in order to, fill up your ego. But I think that some traffic stops are warranted when public safety is involved. I don't mean 5 miles over the speed limit. I mean, if you're doing something egregiously over, something that you could go to jail for. So let me put it this way. I think a traffic stop where you're just going to get a ticket and be on your way does not need to be a traffic stop. If it was a traffic stop where you were going to go to jail because, you ran through a stop sign and nearly missed Granny crossing the street, and, or clipped or something like that, and you need to go to jail, I think in that case, yes, you should be pulled over. But things that you actually get a ticket for, especially a small fine, I don't think that you need to have a traffic stop for. I think that is a tool that is overused, as you already put it. It's used for other things other than just trying to, enforce whatever minor law that they're trying to enforce. I think most of the time it's used for a fishing expedition. It's trying to see if they can find other things that are going on. I think with today's technology, there's no reason that you can't. They already have scanners on police cars that scan license plates. There's no reason that you can't scan that license plate and send a ticket in the mail. No different than if you had a red light camera, or if you had a speed camera, just send your ticket in the mail. No need for an additional interaction, especially because in today's day and age, traffic stops, and not even today's day and age. I mean, throughout the course of American history, traffic stops have led to a vast majority of incidents and deaths happening to minorities, and the reason that I don't think is going to change is because, only minorities feel the brunt of the issue. Once again, if you're white, more than likely your interaction in traffic stop is totally different than if you're black. And it's hard for white people to conceptualize that as a black person, when you get pulled over, even if you're doing nothing wrong, you have a fear in your head that says, this dude might try to make something up. This guy might, try to plant evidence, which we've seen and caught on camera numerous times, police officers planting evidence. This guy might shoot me when I'm reaching for my license. This guy may give me unnecessary harsh penalty. This guy might come and just be harassing me, asking me why, who said, what do you do for a living? How can you afford this car? Is this your car? Nobody needs to have their dignity, scrutinized and questioned like that. No one needs to pretty much justify the reasons why they have things, just to justify where they're going. Where I'm going is none of your business. I think there should be a penalty for officers who misuse the traffic stop if they pull you over for some nonsense, i.e. going 5 miles under the speed limit. I think what really happens, which happens in most cases, is the police need to police themselves. But we find out that that can't be done. They're not good at policing themselves. They're not good at holding each other accountable inside the department. What needs to happen, I agree with you, is some changes in laws to make traffic stops more rigid. In terms of it has to be doing X, Y, or Z. They can't be stopped for suspicion. It can't be some, in most cases, police, they use their discretion. I think that we've come to find out discretion is in the eye of the beholder, of course, and discretion tends to be slanted depending on the color of your skin. So I think some of that needs to try to be legislated out as much as possible. So am I for 100% abolishing traffic stops? I would say no, not 100%. But in most cases, I am for getting rid of them. Just in cases where public safety is involved, then I think they should stay.
I push back a little bit to that. I think even the traffic plate scanners are even a bridge too far for me. It's akin to showing your ID and making sure we know who you are, and you got no warrants out everywhere you go when you walk into every business and just going down a public street. People have a right to move freely without being subjected to that unreasonable search. And I understand that we've given police white lads who've expanded these powers over the years. I just think we've gone a bit too far. I think we both agree that it should be pared back some. The most, and I hear you, and you know what, I agree with that. The most egregious things, someone's doing, 20 miles per over, somebody's literally, obvious hazard. But you're right, the amount of times I've been pulled over and stopped, and the officer tells me no reason why. Not, why I pulled you over? Nothing. One time, I was pulled over, and I asked him afterwards, because this is about me being pulled over somewhere around the 6th or 7th time. And I said, out of curiosity, officer, why'd you pull me over? He said, your license plate light is out. The light that illuminates your license plate. I was just curious to that because he didn't give me a ticket or a warning or anything about it. And, I probably shouldn't have, but he kind of walks back to his car and he gets in his car, and I sat there. Usually they wait for you to drive off. I just hopped out of my car, went and looked. I looked right at my license plate, and I looked back, and it's illuminated, bright as can be. And I looked at him, officer just winked at me and literally drove away. True story. Like, the amount of times that the fishing expedition, it's the part of the talk that African Americans must have when it comes to interacting with law enforcement. I have an entire procedure, literally hands up like I'm, To the point where I've even had officers like, "Hey, easy there," such and such. Like, because I'm literally just hands obviously wide open, fingers spread, my engine's off. I take the keys, I set them up on top, I roll every single window I have down. See all the way up in here. Go for it, because I want to put that officer at ease to the maximum extent possible. Traffic stops are a hazard and a danger to law enforcement officers. I think it was just recently a poor officer was killed at a traffic stop. Um, it happens far too often. It's a danger to them, and it's also a danger to the citizens, because we see time and time again, whether you're Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, and any of the too numerous to name cases of traffic stops. Because sometimes it's just, hey man, you had a bad experience and you're annoyed at this exchange you had with an officer. Sometimes guns get drawn, and that's always going to result in violence and death for citizens, usually who are African American. Or you get arrested just because the officer wants to flex their power. They want to take you downtown, even if they know these charges are going to be dropped. Who cares? We're going to put cuffs on you to, impound your car. You're going to pay for that too, and there'll be no recourse. You mentioned the recourse for abuse. That's part of our whole wide view of law enforcement. There needs to be repercussions, and they need to be publicly available. You need that transparency to the community served, that we can see what's being done wrong and that it's being addressed. But the racial bias cannot be ducked and it cannot be dodged. We've experienced it in our own lives. I'm looking at an article here from NBC News, and it's published March 13th, 2019. And it says, inside 100, this is the title, inside 100 million police traffic stops, new evidence of racial bias. Stanford researchers found that Black and Latino drivers were stopped more often than white drivers based on less evidence of wrongdoing. And that's, anybody who's a minority knows kind of a duh moment. Even people, and it's quite interesting to say, the Black Republican Senator Tim Scott, who stands against reform in many ways while acknowledging himself that he has been racially profiled. I just find that, I'm not even going to, I'll save that for another topic. But even he acknowledges that if you're a Black person and you spend any significant amount of time in America, you've encountered the bias, the looks, and the stares. The Stanford Open Policing Project, they examined 100 million traffic stops conducted from 2011 to 2017 across 21 state patrol agencies and 29 municipal police departments, including California, Illinois, New York, Texas, New Orleans, Philadelphia, San Francisco, St. Paul, Minnesota. And the results show that the police stopped and searched Black and Latino drivers on the basis of less evidence than used in stopping white drivers, who are searched less often, but are actually more likely to be found with illegal items. And reading between the lines for me is basically they don't stop white people unless they truly do something egregious, which is why they probably have a higher likelihood of finding illegal items. That we cannot give subjectivity along with the other immense powers that police officers have with impunity. And they're getting it with increasing impunity. They can be absolutely wrong as to why they're pulling you over, and they'll give you a shrug and a bill for towing your car away. That's the part that's to stop. I would love to see the end of traffic stops if we show it. There shouldn't be 100 million traffic stops over these years. We get just millions and millions of stops every single year. Some states have traffic cameras, some states do not. But if they do, that it makes it even worse. You have speed cameras here, red light cameras here, and you still have cops sitting. I think if you remove these officers in the traffic stops, you can better use those resources elsewhere. How many times, Mike, have you seen police just sitting with a speed gun out, just looking to catch somebody going a few miles over? You brought it up. Literally, police pulled over a Black man going 5 miles under. It's possibly pulled over for driving too slow. The reality is you were just pulled over for being Black, for the dark skin that you have driving by. It has to stop. And I would love to see it stop, because I believe that's a part of when people hear defund the police, they think just like getting rid of them. No, I think part of it, for at least for me, I can't speak for others, is a reevaluation of our resources. I was the president of a homeowners association where I left in Maryland, where we used to live, of course. And I never forget, we had a couple of break-ins in the very back of our neighborhood, where it's dark and we didn't have any lights. So while we're trying to remedy that and get, more lighting back here, because they were obviously being targeted because it was dark back there, I made contact with our local police department, Mike, and I asked them, especially on like we're getting a lot of break-ins on weekend nights, et cetera, can we get one of your officers to sit here instead of out on the main strip? because they were sitting out on the main street, and they were doing so, with a speed gun out, Mike, looking to pull people over along Central Avenue. And I asked them, can we borrow one of them to hang out here on these nights? Because obviously this is a spike in local crime. Can we get any of that? They wanted us to pay for that, Mike. They wanted to charge the community. And it would be like, getting one of their off-duty guys to sit there in a cruise, and they want us to pay for it in that aspect. There are high crime areas in every major city, and in every place there's some area that's a cause for concern. I think we need to get officers back on foot, moving around these areas where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, things like that, especially in the city that we spent a lot of time back in DC and such. We need to get officers on feet so that you have business owners who have done business there for years. They should know the officers working their patrolling beats. And officers should know them. Officers should know the people that they serve instead of driving by and just pulling over the cars that are passing through. We need to get officers to sit in high crime areas, to be observant and be on the ready, instead of spending so much time dedicated to pulling over people so they can collect more money and more revenue. Because they're fishing, and they're hoping that they find drugs. And even when they pull somebody over for the wrong reason, because in that North Carolina case that we mentioned, they did find drugs. They got it right. They found someone who had drugs in their car. But the entire purpose of the traffic stop, the pretext for the violation, was wrong. They pulled them over literally for no reason, and they found evidence, and that evidence was found to be admissible. That flies in the face of a free and fair court system, a fair and just legal system. You're not supposed to be able to kick in somebody's front door and just find evidence and use it. What's to stop them? What stops them is that evidence becomes not admissible because it was found the wrong way. But in this case, in that Hine versus North Carolina in 2014 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of traffic stops. There's essentially almost no power they have. Police can disarm you for their own safety, even though they have no reason to believe otherwise. I'm a concealed carry permit holder. Sometimes I do have my firearm with me in a vehicle. And if I'm pulled over and I tell them it's there, they have a right to take it out. They can disarm me and all above, even if they know who I am. They know this is my car, and they know that they've pulled me over for essentially no reason, or even if I was a mile over, here's your ticket. There's a wide latitude of what officers can do, and they're always talking about safety. We hear that so many times, that they feared for their life. There have been cases of officers, somebody gets pulled over and then they go to punch the gas. You know what happens? The officer will grab a hold of the car so that they can get dragged. And they do that so that now their life is in danger and they can use lethal force to execute the driver. We're constantly exposing law enforcement officers to this danger. My question is why? What benefit is there? Does that reduce the amount of speeders and crazy drivers we see on the road, and anybody who's been in their car at all knows that's not true? Hell, half the time, I can't count how many times I make a comment when I see something insane on the road and I say, where are the police at for this? Meanwhile, if I'm doing 5 miles under the speed limit, somebody will be here to pull me over. And we've moved out here. I've been pulled over once. In fact, me and my wife got pulled over back-to-back days as the officer, quote unquote, introduced himself, and let us know the speed limit dropped, and, to watch our speed there. I'm like, were we even speeding? I literally drove 300 feet here. But me and my wife just so happens to be, black. I'm black. My wife is black and Hispanic. And, we were just getting pulled over here left and right out here on the strip. Not left and right, but we were stopped for no reason is my point. And that's a problem for me, man. The powers continue to grow. You have no right to privacy on the roads. You have no right. And to a reasonable extent, you shouldn't. Obviously, if you're driving recklessly and you're a hazard to everyone around you, that's one thing. But these unprovable, you fail to make a signal and you change lanes, and they can make up whatever they want. Even the video that activates when they hit their switch, it doesn't show anything of this. I think that should be a part of it. If you observe it, your camera should observe it. If you can't back it up with the footage in front of your car, then you didn't see it. Things of that nature. We do need to hamper down. I want to minimize them almost outright for only the most egregious cases. It should be literally a news story that someone was pulled over. That's what I would like to see. And maybe that's pushing it to the extreme, but we do need extreme reform, because the idea that every African American driving has to be and then in that case that I mentioned initially, the officers questioned her, "Why do you seem nervous?" And I've had that asked. And the reality is, everyone, especially people of color, should be nervous when the police are pulling you over. And you have more cause to be nervous when you know damn well you weren't speeding and you didn't blow any stop signs, you didn't do anything. Because the fishing expedition, what time is this cop on? Is he having a bad day? Do I have to be careful how I speak to him so that I don't get snatched out my car like Sandra Bland did and arrested? How are you able to constantly put cuffs on people, take them downtown, charges dropped, and like you just continue to patrol? You just continue to operate as if nothing happened. You are wrongfully arresting people consistently. And then we don't even keep proper documentation of how often that happens. We need more transparency, and we need to reorganize the police as we need them. And I believe the elimination of the traffic stop, which also goes into a reduced insistence on having police enforce traffic laws. You know how many incidents of death have escalated out of someone with some tickets not paid in time? There are literally cases. In fact, so we just saw the killing of Dante Wright that happened, barely over a month ago. And police pulled him over for an air freshener hanging from the rearview window. That was the cause for the stop. And when they pulled him over, they found, again, a fishing expedition. They found that he had a warrant. And then the question is, that what's interesting about that is, what was the warrant for? It was for not paying a ticket. It made it seem like this man has, like that's the equivalent of being wanted for murder or a bank robbery. And then when there's a confrontation, when there's confusion, when there's this confrontation gets escalated, you have an officer screaming "taser, taser, taser" as she draws her firearm and fires into the chest, killing this man. And obviously that sparked protest and outrage. But we shouldn't have this traffic stop in the first place. One thing I love to say is that when we're talking about laws being passed, you are talking about something being enforced at gunpoint. Every law, every single thing. Anything that can be backed up by the criminal justice system is enforced at gunpoint. So when you're talking about someone, couldn't pay their $100 speeding ticket that they might very well have gotten frivolously, simply because we had a pandemic going on and people are losing their jobs and people are getting stimulus checks, so you couldn't pay on time. So they issue a warrant for your arrest. Gunpoint. Officers come to enforce parking tickets. That's insanity. We are sending armed enforcement agents of government with guns to come and get you for not paying parking tickets. I think a lot of people don't kind of look at it that way, but I do. It's insane that we use armed enforcement officers to enforce traffic violations, to enforce parking tickets being paid, because that's what happens when you have these sort of, you mentioned that's why I don't like the idea of the scanning of the license plates. And even worse, you might have somebody driving a car registered to someone else, which is quite common. You can have, it could be friends in town. I can have my brothers in town. You can have people living in the same household, and they scan that license and it says that there's a warrant out for their arrest. It doesn't even, depending on which system, doesn't even fully tell you what it's for. You got people getting felony stops because either A, there's a warrant out for their arrest for not paying a parking ticket. There are cases of officers initiating felony stops, and for those that don't know, that means they treat it as a high risk, as if they're pulling over someone with a felony, like they're treating them like this is a bank robber. They're treating them like this is an armed, known to be dangerous murderer. If you drive too far, and even though police know that's a common tactic, you're in the dark. This is a side of a major highway with no lights. So you drive to a well-lit area so that Both the police officer and the driver can feel comfortable, but you drove just a touch too far, so we'll treat it as a felony stop. We're ordering you out of the car. Another thing I'd love to see, if you've ever watched some of this footage and body cam footage and things of that nature, it annoys me when police do not explain themselves and announce themselves. They're public servants. In my mind, if you do have a traffic stop, it should be, "How you doing? I'm Officer Troy. I've pulled you over because I observed you exceeding the speed limit. License and registration. I'm going to ask you to step out of the car because blank. You are under arrest because blank." How many times, Mike, have you seen an officer just simply say, "Put your hands behind your back," and they just kind of start grabbing you? What's
And you
your
know what? And a lot of times when they do it, it's with expletives. They're saying, "Get the F out the car, shut the F up." You know, and they're yelling at you. And when we talk about de-escalation, you hear it all the time. Our police officers are taught de-escalation. No, they're not. As soon as that cop has an inclination that this is not going to be, a walk on rose petals, they crank it up to 1,000. They're cursing at you. They're yelling at you. They're giving you conflicting orders. They're telling you, "Hands up, out the car." Well, my hands up, right? How am I gonna get out the car if I can't open the car? I mean, they give me things. People are literally panicking. You can see them panicking, trying to understand what the hell does the officer want from me. And they're coming in hot, and they're coming in aggressive, and and somehow they expect, and they want to get up there and cry if "Oh, if you just comply, shut up and comply, shut up and comply." It's one of those things. It's like you're dealing with a member of the public. You're dealing with someone who's paying your salary, because as a public servant, your boss is the taxpayers at the end of the day. That doesn't happen. You rarely see when the officer asks somebody to get out the car. They don't give you full explanations. They just ask you, "Can you step out the car? Can you come to the back of the car?"
With no explanation.
No explanation. Yeah, you're right,
In
Jordan.
fact, the very first article I mentioned about the woman being pulled over illegally because they changed the law, you can't be pulled over tail lights. Her name was Juanisha C. Brooks. And this is captured, by the way, by dash cam and body cam footage. She asked repeatedly that Virginia State police trooper, his name's Robert G. Hindenlang, "Why have you pulled me over?" He repeatedly refused to answer. The dashboard camera video from Trooper's car show. He did not tell her at all that he noticed the taillights were out as she drove, which screams to me that he made it up afterwards. He had to find a reason. But instead, he told her that if she would step outside of her car, he would show her why she had been stopped. She told her, "No thanks, I don't want to get out." The officer then reached in, unlocked her door, and dragged her out of the car while she loudly pleaded with him to stop. He spun her against the car and handcuffed her. Can you imagine that? What do you think is going to happen? I don't give a damn if you have a badge, uniform, what have you. You just start grabbing people. You put your hands on people first, and you'll answer questions later. In non-life-threatening situations, this is not somebody who's been identified as a bank robber, a murderer, mass shooters. They get brought in peacefully. But yet people, regular citizens on the street, I'll tell you why if you step out. No thanks. I'm going to say no thanks too. I'm a giant of a man. I don't want to stand out and get out in close proximity to this officer side of a road. He's going to probably get more nervous because I'm huge. Literally, just my sheer presence would be threatening to him. And then you just start reaching into the car. "Hey man, what's going on? You gonna talk to me or something?" They'd feel as though they don't have to. Just grab and pull. And I can just sit in there self-imagining an officer, it's like nightmare fuel. You unlock my door, you try to pull me out of the car. I'll tell you, it's not going to work when one man's going to pull me out of the car if I just simply sit there. I'm well over 500 pounds. You're not going to pull me out in the car. You're just going to keep pulling, and looking stupid till you lose your balance, fall backwards. And what's going to happen is, and we all know, the officer's going to draw a gun. I told my wife the other day, Mike, like that's if I had a sketch comedy show, that's like a running joke. Officer draws gun, sneeze wrong, officer draws gun. It's all they know and all they have to do. It's so ingrained in them that in the killing of Dante Wright, she's screaming, "Taser, taser, taser, want to use a taser, but draws gun." That's all the authority that they have is distilled in ultimately that gun. It's not even a badge. Because if you talk and explain to people, people will behave reasonably. But when you have an officer and when they're frequently and often behaving irrationally and unreasonably, there's no reason not to tell somebody why you didn't pull them over, especially for non-felony issues. And there's no reason to just reach in and start grabbing. That's going to result in confrontation every single time. By default, you are going to have issues. 0.0. Now you have to fit a narrative. Now you must write a description. You have to explain to your superiors and for the record, why did you arrest this person? You got to make it up. You got to figure it out. They look nervous. Whatever, generic thing I can make up in the meantime, because I don't have to explain to begin with. None of this matches footage as we see. That's crazy. That has to stop. No citizen should have fear when we talk about that. We've mentioned in the past, you should be comfortable. You should feel safe when you see police officers. I experience nervousness every time I see one. What time is it? What kind do we get? Do I have a nice polite one? I've had polite interactions. Even the officer that pulled me over just literally steps from my front door. He was very polite about it. Polite about wasting my goddamn time. That's what he did. He wasted my time, wasted my wife's time. He was super polite though. Like, great. I was able to get through that and move on about my day. What happens? You have officers who have a bad day. What happens? You have officers who just feel as though they might have got one. They're fishing and they think they got a big fish. That's a problem. And it's a point of conflict that needs to be eliminated because it's unnecessary in today's day and age. We have cameras on every corner, surveillance everywhere. You mentioned it. Just mail a ticket if somebody's mail them another ticket if someone is behind on something, not paying, speeding, whatever issue you have, because it doesn't make streets any safer. Nothing short of not having people out there makes it any safer. It doesn't make people drive any less crazy. This is the reality. We have to begin to reform what we want of police, and we have a right, by the way, to do that. We are the citizens. We hold the power. They work for us. They are public servants. We, the public, we, the people, can decide what we want them to do or not do. That is our control and command. And there's no arguing that. So this is a conversation about that. This is what I would love to see happen. I'm sure there will be a lot of opinions on the matter, but I see it as, why pose the risk to the officer? Why pose the risk to the citizen? And why open the door for these lawsuits? Why open the door for the accidental killings when someone thinks they're pulling a taser and instead they pull, quote unquote, an accident, their gun and fire? Why leave that door wide open? There's no reason to have millions upon millions upon millions of traffic stops out there in the country.
100% agree. It's something that can be avoided, even with simple things like we need less police officers with guns. I mean, why do all of them need to be armed with deadly force? How often?
Heck, maybe that should be our next
their entire
topic.
Career. Yeah, and won't get into that. But police officers going their entire career without ever unholstering their firearm. So why do all of them need one? Maybe just save it for SWAT or tactical, and that's a conversation for another day. But things need to happen. We all, so many things revolve around criminal justice reform. There's a lot of ills in the system. Some people want to act like the system is fine, the system is okay, and those people tend to have a white skin complexion. No surprise there. It's very disheartening. DAs run on campaigns of cleaning up the streets and blocking as many people as they can. Is that really the answer? So I think this is part of a holistic criminal justice reform that needs to happen. This one, emphasis on police reform, lessening the interactions of law enforcement and the public. For me, unless I need you, I don't ever really need to interact with a police officer. I just don't, unless I need you, unless I call you or summon you, or someone summons you for my safety, I really don't need you. I don't want to have any unnecessary interactions. I mean, that's just how I feel about it, because people that look like me, that might share my skin color, don't have the same rosy interactions, that other people have. So when I see people saying, "Oh, back to blue," and this and that, I'm like, that's because 9 times out of 10 you're white, and your interactions with police officers are totally different. It seems to be a lack of empathy in this country when it comes to understanding why people of Black and brown skin have such an issue with police. It's like they ignore the statistics that show that police are way more likely to pull over, way more likely to hurt and abuse, and way more likely to kill people of Black and brown descent. These are hard facts, hard facts. Despite the number of interactions with Black and brown people, those interactions are actually higher than the per capita rating. It's ridiculous. So if we can lessen those interactions by reforming and reframing what a traffic stop is, and saving that for only the most egregious of behaviors, then we can actually save a lot of lives and save a lot of heartache in the future. We're tired of seeing these news stories. It seems that every couple of months or so, a new one hits the airways. And as people in the country say, you have some people in the country say, "I'm sick of seeing these stories." Well, do something about it. Hold your local and federal elected officials, hold them to task, saying we want to get some kind of police reform because we're tired of seeing this. So that's something that needs to be taken care of. That's something that people, our elected officials with legislative power, can actually make laws to make it illegal to do these types of traffic stops. And we're hoping that this push and changing of how we view a traffic stop continues to get more public attention, continues to get put into the mainstream and in front of news outlets to get people thinking of how can we lessen the interactions with police. So that's, we want to thank you guys for listening. Hopefully this is a thought-provoking conversation, because some people may not have even heard of getting rid of traffic stop. Hopefully this will get you thinking of other ways where we can lessen the types of interactions with police that get people of Black, brown descent, Black and brown skin color, get them hurt, get them unfairly scrutinized and abused, jailed, and killed. How can we lessen these interactions? This is just one of the ways. So thanks for listening. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, share, all those things. And thank you for listening to another episode of Upon Further Review.